Modernism was a literary, artistic, and cultural movement which developed during the first decades of the 20th century. Modernists wanted to create a new age, so they interrupted the father to son transmission of traditions like arts, literature, science, and religion. This way of thinking was influenced by new scientific discoveries such as Einstein's theory of relativity, the new quantum mechanics by Max Planck, and Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, and so on. The First World War caused a generational clash between the old generation, guilty of horrors such as imperialism, and the younger generation who was forced to fight a war they couldn't understand. All these factors brought to the end of positivistic faith in science and progress. There is no faith in future, but also no consolation in the past. The only thing that matters is the present. Modern poetry began with imagism, invented by the American poet Ezra Pound, and imagists used clear and precise images, and it was inspired by IQ poems of Eastern tradition, so written in Chinese and Japanese. These languages are pictographic, so they associate an abstract image to a word. The most famous poem by Ezra Pound is In the Station of the Metro, a two-line poem with no verbs or actions. We could be anywhere at any time. The poem alone may seem meaningless, and it's actually the title who gives us the context. The appearances of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black boat. As Pound is walking down the street, he sees people coming out of the subway, but they don't look alive. They actually look like they come from the world of the dead. The poem was actually longer, but it cut things down and eliminated words, coming down to these two final lines. And this also comes from from a perception of life. The truth is something you can only reach by cutting away the useless rhetoric. On the other hand, the Countess is the longest poem in modern poetry, and after observing the dynamics of World War One, Pound reflects on the economy and society, and even if it was American, he criticizes the American Revolution a lot because when this revolution broke out, its whole purpose was to free the 13 colonies of America, but at the end they ended up building the Bank of the United States, which is the equivalent of the Bank of England. Um, all this is what inspires the canto with Usura, where after encountering fascism, Pound finds that Benito Mussolini could be the Jefferson for Italy, as Jefferson fought against the uh, construction of the Bank of the United States. In the poem with Usura, Pound talks about usury as the act of lending money and having in return the same money with interest. With usury, in fact, capitalism reaches the final stage of its evolution as money itself is directly used for profit. Pound thought that Mussolini could have stopped usury and found some measures against it. Pound, in fact, wants to make all things new, a motto of modernism. Pound, unlike Eliot, prefers translating to quoting, as translating means making alive in modern terms, and quoting simply means reporting dead voices from the past. Eliot uses new techniques, and he was actually helped by Ezra Pound, um, whom he met in London, and with his help he began publishing his work. Eliot was also American, and he was born in 1888 in Missouri. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. The new techniques I was talking about are the mythical method and the use of objective correlative. Objective correlative is a set of objects, images, and references that evoke a particular emotion, and only that one. In addition, Eliot stated that the task of the poet is not to present but to represent, and it is not to say but to show, because the poetry must be impersonal. Eliot uses the myths of the past to explain, in a certain sense, order the chaotic present era through the mythical method. And we can see that in The Wasteland, that is set in post war Europe, especially in the Austrian Empire, which is in decadence. Pictures, voices, and scenes of different languages and cultures coexist in the wasteland. There are no clear signs of hope for the entire Western world. Absolute truths and all certainties are shattered. Past and present coexist. There are frequent shifts in times and place. There are no logical rules. And the world of the wasteland is characterized by the absence of true human relationships. The poem starts with an epigraph in Greek and Latin, in which we refer to it refers to an ancient Greek myth, the Sibyl, who was granted immortality by Apollo, but she forgot to ask for eternal youth. So she will grow older, but she will not stay young. She will get eventually older and older, and this is as a metaphor for the spiritual end of the culture of Europe and Europe itself. As when the speaker asks the Sibyl what she wants the most, she answers that she wants to die. Eliot openly addresses Ezra Pound as Il miglior fabbro because Pound collaborated in the writing of the poem by shortening it. The wasteland is made of 5 parts, and each section is dedicated to an element. The part 1 is the burial of the dead. Part 2, a game of chess. Part 3, the fire sermon. Part 4, death by water. And part 5, what the thunder said. In the first sermon, there is a description of a loveless sexual encounter between a typist and a clerk in her apartment. There is actually no passion in their meeting, and she is relieved when he leaves, because, as I said before, there are no true human relationships in the wasteland. The episode is narrated by the voice of Tiresias, a Greek mythological character, and even if he is not a real character but just a spectator, is still the most important figure in the poem, as in him all the characters and their experiences converge. In the final section, What the Thunder Said, there is a return of divine speech and the promise of rain and water. The divine speech, the thunder, occurs in a simple syllable, da. The word da is interpreted as 3 teachings: give, be compassionate, and control yourselves. So the only way to put an end to the desolation and the sterility of the wasteland is to open our heart to others, to be helpful, and to give without conditions. The poem ends with a word of the Hindu religion, Shanti, repeated 3 times. It refers to Nirvana, which is the peace of all senses. James Joyce was born in Dublin in 1882 and he was educated at a Jesuit school. He studied modern languages and then moved to Trieste, where he became Svevo's English teacher. In fact, he made friends with Italo Svevo. Joyce's scripts are mostly influenced by his culture. Ireland was the center of paralysis. Irish people were passive and unwilling or unable to rebel against the British rule, their colonizer. His main works are Dubliners and Ulysses. Dubliners is a collection of 15 short stories about people living in Dublin, usually people of the lower middle class, who were oppressed by economic problems involving politics and culture. The dominant theme of the stories is the failure to find a way out of their paralysis. In fact, each short story opens in medias res, when a turning point is going to happen in the life of the protagonists. This moment is called epiphany, which is like sudden manifestation of an hidden truth. One of the stories is about Eve, Evelyn, um, who is completely different from the Eve from the Bible. And even if the story is not in first person, we see everything by her point of view, from her point of view. The story begins as Evelyn is watching out of the window through some dusty curtains, and this reflects the character's state of mind. Her father is, in fact, an abusive figure, while her boyfriend Frank is completely opposite of her father. He seems to have good intentions and to be sincere, as in fact his name is Frank. And they decide to live together, but once Evelyn and Frank are about to embark, she stays still, like paralyzed, after hearing a song that she heard the day her mother died. And in fact, on that day, she promised her to take care of her family. So we actually don't know if she makes the right choices and decides to leave, or she decides to keep her promise and stays. In the other short story, The Death, we find Gabriel Conroy, who is a college professor and a literary critic, and he embodies what Joyce would have been if he had not escaped Dublin. His wife Greta, him and his wife Greta go to a Christmas party for the celebration of the feast of the Epiphany, and when they are about to leave, she finds her wife apparently lost in thought. Greta, in fact, heard a song that reminded her about a past lover, Michael Fury, who used to sing it and used to be in love with her but died young. Out of curiosity, Gabriel asks her how he died, and she answers that she thinks that he died for her. In fact, he died after waiting for her in the rain. This revelation serves as an epiphany, as Gabriel realizes that Michael, even if dead, is the only one who truly lived. At the end of the story, Gabriel is standing out of the window, standing at the window, watching the snow fall over the city and the cemetery as well, upon the living and the dead. A portrait of the artist as a young man is an autobiographical story of Stephen Dedalus, a young Irish writer that is Joyce's fictional double. He's a rebel against his family, his religion, his nation, and we find him again in the Ulysses. Stephen Dedalus is um, actually a reference, both biblical and mythological, uh, because Stephen is the first Christian martyr, and Daedalus is the one who escapes the labyrinth with what walks wings. Stephen is indeed a martyr, as he goes on a voluntary exile to become an artist, but he fails and he becomes a simple teacher, and we see this in the Ulysses. The story is set in Dublin on a single day, June the 16th of 1904, but the telling is extremely long. Um, uses a new technique, the stream of consciousness, which is a technique that describes the mental process made of memories, dreams, sensations, intuitions, and it consists of symbols, associations of ideas flowing freely. The features of interior monologue are the first person, sudden shifts from thought to thought, no connection from fragmentation. Pound emphasized that the endless proliferations of voices what made Joyce's novel unique. Joyce's characters not only speak their own language, but they think their own language. Stephen has lost his father, and another Dubliner, Leopold Bloom, suffers from two emotional crises: the loss of his father and of his son, and the infidelity of his wife, Molly Bloom. Stephen, Leopold, and Molly correspond to Telemachus, Ulysses and his faithful wife Penelope of Homer's Odyssey, according to the mythical method, but they are completely different from each other. They represent the condition of the 20th century man, a crisis from the order, the tradition. Um, Another fellow Dubliner, is Samuel Beckett, who was also graduated who also graduated in modern languages, French and Italian, and he was influenced by French existentialism, in particular by Camus and Sartre. Um, he wrote Waiting for Godot in French, and it was an instant success. Beckett decide in fact to write his play in a foreign language for two reasons. The first one is that, of course, English was the language of the colonizer, and so he didn't want to use it, even though at the end it was later translated into English. And the other reason was that if he wrote his play in a foreign language, he could maintain his speech as simple and detached as possible. Um, his play is part of the theater of absurd and the historical, social, and cultural background in which Beckett worked and lived is the end of World War II. As for poetry and novels, the theater is just a reflection of the effects of such historical condition, and the most common feeling is anxiety. Men lost all their certainties. That brings to ask oneself about what is the purpose of man. And Beckett theater is influenced by existentialist philosophers such as Heidegger, Kierkegaard, Sartre, Camus, and so we are now in the cultural atmosphere of absurdism. The absurd is something meaningless or useless or purposeless. There is no plot, no chronological order, no rules, just like in the wasteland. And in Beckett's plays, we do not find any passion at all. There is mm, it is not like the Greek theater. In fact, Waiting for Godot only has two acts and doesn't have any chronological pattern. In Waiting for Godot, we find two protagonists of this play, Didi and Gogo, Vladimir and Estragon, and we know nothing about them. They could be anyone. And there is no useful communication between the characters. One plays with his hat, Didi, and the other plays with his boots, Gogo. So one has a problem with moving, and the other, Didi, which in French means to tell, is the one who has the problem with speaking. Another example of miscommunication is when they refer to a dream that one of them had, but they cannot recall if it was actually a dream or a memory. And in the end, they change the subject. They exchange discussions just to fill the silence, the void. They try to commit suicide, but they can't. They can't even put an end to their useless life. In fact, the setting is also absurd. The stage is empty, and there is just a bare tree, a dead tree, as dead as their free will. There's another complementary couple in the play, Pozzo and Lucky. Pozzo is the master, while Lucky is a slave who is kept by a rope, like a dog. But in the second act, the role is reversed, and since Pozzo is now blind, it's Lucky who guides him, resembling Hegel's master-slave relation and emancipation. At the end of both acts, as they are waiting for Godot, a boy arrives and says that Mr. Godot is actually coming the day later, so tomorrow. This scene is repeated at the end of both acts, and so it is revealed that the two characters are waiting in vain. They wait for someone who should bring sense to their life. So in the end, they decide to leave, and as one of them suggests to just leave, and the other accepts, they do not move, as if something higher doesn't let them move. And so the play ends like this.